This might be the most awful case I've ever covered, especially since it happened just 30 minutes from where I live. In July of 2007, the quiet town of Cheshire, Connecticut was rocked by one of the most disturbing home invasions in U.S. history, when two men followed Jennifer Hawk Pettit and her 11-year-old daughter Michaela home from the grocery store and returned that night to break into the family's house. Dr. William Pettit was savagely beaten with a baseball bat and tied up in the basement, while Jennifer and her daughters Michaela and 17-year-old Haley were bound upstairs and held captive for hours while the intruders roamed freely throughout the home. At dawn, Jennifer was forced to withdraw $15,000 from a bank, quietly alerting a teller that her family was being held hostage, but police who surrounded the home decided to wait rather than storm the house. Inside, the terror escalated. Jennifer was killed, Michaela was left tied to her bed after being subject to unthinkable abuse, and gasoline was poured throughout the home, on the floors, on furniture, and even on the girls themselves before the intruders set the house on fire. Jennifer's body was discovered on the first floor, while Haley and Michaela, still bound, died of smoke inhalation as flames consumed their rooms. Against all odds, William managed to escape barefoot and bloodied through the basement, crawling to a neighbor's yard as the only survivor of the family. The two attackers crashed the family's SUV while fleeing and were arrested immediately, later sentenced to death for one of the most infamous crimes in Connecticut history. Sentences eventually reduced to life after the state abolished capital punishment. Adding to the horror, one of the killers later tried to deflect blame by calling William a coward and suggesting his failure to act was the real reason why his wife and daughters died. He didn't want to die alone, so in 2003, 56-year-old Kim Dae-han did the unthinkable. After suffering a stroke and sinking into despair, he carried containers of flammable liquid onto a crowded South Korean subway train and lit them on fire. Within minutes, the underground station was an inferno, one train engulfed in flames, another trapped behind sealed doors as the smoke choked hundreds of passengers. By the time rescuers gained control, 192 passengers were dead, and hundreds more were injured in South Korea's worst disaster in peacetime history. Kim, badly burned but alive, ended up fleeing the scene, only to be captured, sentenced to life, and die alone in prison the following year. On Halloween night in 1984, 29-year-old Doreen Erbert answered her door expecting trick-or-treaters, but instead was confronted by her ex-husband, William Michael Dennis, wearing the same creepy big bad wolf mask he had worn at a party the year before. Dennis had never forgiven Doreen for the accidental drowning of their 4-year-old son Paul years earlier, and had grown obsessed with the delusion that she wanted the boy dead. Armed with a machete, he forced his way inside and launched a savage frenzy of blows, striking Doreen dozens of times. She was 8 months pregnant, and the attack was so brutal that it ripped open her abdomen and literally expelled her unborn child onto the floor, the baby showing deep chop wounds and pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators later described the scene as straight out of a horror movie, with blood splattered across the entryway and the mask lying discarded nearby. Dennis was eventually sentenced to death, leaving behind a crime that remains one of the most grotesque murders ever committed on Halloween. In 2013, neighbors in West Virginia notified police after spotting children locked inside a shed, and what investigators uncovered was one of the most horrific adoption scandals in recent history. Jean K. Whitefeather and her husband Donald Lance had adopted 5 black siblings only to subject them to forced labor, confinement, and racial abuse, essentially treating them as slaves. The kids were forced to dig holes with their bare hands, hardly fed, pepper sprayed for disobedience, and locked away at night with no lights or toilets. When their oldest daughter testified, she told them, "I'll never understand how you can sleep at night. You are monsters." In March 2025, a judge sentenced both of them to more than 150 years behind bars, declaring, "You brought these children to West Virginia, a place I know as almost heaven, and you put them in hell. This court will now put you in yours." She endured abortion after abortion until her body could no longer take it. In 2017, a woman in eastern China reportedly died after undergoing 4 abortions in a single year, each one carried out under pressure from her husband, who was determined to have a son. When every pregnancy resulted in a girl, he insisted she terminate, ignoring the strain it put on her health. After the 4th procedure, her body gave out and she succumbed to the damage. A grim reminder of how cultural obsession with male heirs can turn deadly.